come and listen to these talks. You have to you drive a long way on Saturdays and Sundays for tournaments and games. You go out of town. As your kids get older, you'll start traveling. Our vacations are built around going to Dallas and going to Houston for tournaments and things along those lines. I can tell you, all the best cheap buffet pizza places in Plano, you know what I mean? Because we've eaten at all of them. And so there's a certain sacrifice that you make, plus the financial sacrifice and whatnot to have them do it. So why do you do that? Why are you here? Why are your kids playing soccer?
They enjoy it.
Because they enjoy it. Why else?
Good for them.
Why is it good for them?
It keeps them active.
Keeps them active. They're not just sitting around the house. What else? Keeps them out of trouble. Gives them something else. Actually, you know what? There's really good literature that shows when kids are involved in sports, one of the benefits is because they're at practice, they're not home doing other bad things, right? And actually filling up that time is a really good way to do that, and one of the big health benefits, right? What else? What else do we help to gain from sport? There's one more big thing where we normally talk about. Leadership, team concepts, sort of, building them as a person and trying to make that happen, right? All right, so hit a couple. Go ahead again. So team play, cooperation, discipline, perseverance. One more, goal achievement, and one more, self-esteem. And then lastly, one more. So what about winning? How does that fit into what you're doing? How does that fit into your goals and how you think about soccer, right? How you think about youth sport. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today, is how to think about that, how do you figure out whether or not your kids are being successful with what's going on? All right, next. All right, so here is, if your goal is winning, right? And that's what you want to do, I have the key to success. You will win every time. Do you know what the secret is? Play bad teams, right? That's how you win. Two more. There. Now, so this is the State Cup of Idaho, and how excited they are that they won the State Cup at Idaho, right? Now, that is anybody from Idaho here, right? So if you are, I apologize for insulting you for that, but that's not the most strenuous state championship to win, the Idaho State Championship in soccer. You know what I mean? And so you think about things along those lines. In fact, we play this. Did you play that game when you were kids where you would especially the guys where you'd have a football and one kid would have it and run around and everybody else would try to beat that kid up and then they would have to drop the ball. It's kind of like rugby, So they play that in my neighborhood, like these 8, 9-year-old boys. And I got out and played with them the other day. I was so good. It was crazy. Knocking the crap out of those little kids. Put my finger up, I was number 1, right? So that's the problem if all we do is focus on winning. It's not satisfying in and of itself, right? There's bigger components to what we're doing and why we're participating in sport. And what I tell the athletes, so when I give this talk to athletes, I talk to them about this issue at the University of Texas, and I said, if your goal is to be an All-American and your goal is to win, then my suggestion to you is transfer to a Division III school. You'll be the best athlete at the school. And if you can talk some of your friends into going with you, you're going to win a championship, right? And you're going to move that forward. You'll start 4 years, a 4-year All-American. They'll name a building after you, right? You'll be the greatest player ever. But that's not why you play sport. You play sport for different reasons. All right, next, please. Okay, and it's not that hard to win, actually. Now, you may be shocked to hear that, given the results of some of your teams. I know when my daughter was your age, I would have been shocked to hear that it wasn't that hard to win, but it's actually not that hard to win. Here's what you do. Next slide. Put speed on wings, right? Put your speed up front to the outside. Next. And one of the things, and the next one of the things that we see in alignment with this, there are other clubs that we compete against where they will take one of their better strikers, one of their faster forwards, and they'll hold them down a level. Even though they should be on the top team, they'll hold them to the second team so that they can dominate and score a lot of goals. And they'll take the striker that should be on that team and move them down to the third team so that they can score a lot of goals and win, right? Now that gives you a lot of victories, but it doesn't necessarily help the development of that child. The other thing that we see, and that you will grow to appreciate at some point, is that when you're in tournaments or you're playing league play, they'll take players, if it's a really critical game, they'll move players from the top team down to the second team, right? So that they can win that game, so that second team can win that game and can be able to advance, and then the kids that would normally be playing on that team get to watch. And so that's a strategy to bring speed down, to bring athletes down. Next, please. Direct soccer, which means long passes down the field. Not passing back and forth, kicking it as hard as you can kick it down to the corners. Next slide, please. Big players as center mids to break up those opposing players. When you watch teams where their focus is to win, they take the tallest kids they have and they put them on the back line to be able to break up those long passes and to be able to interrupt that speed. Next, please. And then determine positions early so that you can refine those skills and perfect the skills they have. So you take kids early on, you look at their athletic ability, you use that athletic ability to decide what positions they should be in. You place them in that position at 7 years old, and you have them work in that position all year. Because that's how you get good at it, right? That's how you get good. And if you follow this, you will win. Win a ton of games. Next slide. And you practice 20 minutes a day on set pieces. Corner kicks, starting the game, right? Goal kicks, things along those lines. My guess is you spend very little time practicing that here, okay? But if you want to win, that's what you do. Is you spend a lot of time doing those things. Next slide, please. So, does this actually build better players? Because when we think about winning, the assumption that we make is that the teams that win have the better players. And that that's what this is accomplishing for us. But is that really what's happening? Next. Next. And one more. So, what wins at U10, what wins at U8, doesn't win at U14 anymore. Because you have such a diversity in athletic ability when you're 8 years old, right? You have kids who mature earlier than other kids. You especially see it on the girls' side, but even on the boys' side, maybe about 10 years old, you really start to see this split of kids that are maturing at different ages, things along those lines. They're taller than other kids, and they just beat the other kids up, right? And teams build around those abilities, and they have tremendous success, and they end up winning all the time. But that kind of direct soccer, that kind of focus on set plays doesn't win when you're 14 years old. It doesn't win when you're 15 years old. You have to think about a different skill set then. And so the question is, how do we focus on training? Do we focus on training to be the best 8-year-old we can be? Or do we focus our training on being the best 14-year-old we can be and beginning that process when you're 8? Right? That's sort of the thing that I hope you will appreciate. Next slide, please. Okay, next. So, what happens when everybody's equal? What happens when the other kids grow up and the other kids get fast and you're not the fastest kid? So when I was in 8th grade, I was 6 foot, 200 pounds. And I used to just beat the crap out of people, right? I was just bigger than everybody else. I was a phenomenal offensive lineman. But then I got to high school and I was 6'3", 240. And I was still pretty good, but not good enough to play Division I football, you know? Now everybody's tall, everybody's big. The game changes. You have to play this differently. So what happens as the other kids grow as well, and how does that start to change? What leads to victories then? Well, it's ball movement that leads to victory, right? When you're a 14-year-old, when you're a 15-year-old, you better have good skills, you better have good shape, you better be able to move the ball in close quarters to be able to create an attack, you better be able to reverse field, okay? That's what wins when you're 14. The problem is that doesn't win when you're 8. Because what happens when you're 8? You try to kick the ball back to the goalie, you make a weak kick, they intercept it and go in and score a goal. That's what happens, right? So it's when you're trying to teach those things that you sacrifice winning in the near term, because that's what's going to lead you to be successful when you're 14 years old, when you're 15 years old, when you're 16 years old, okay? Next, please. So, the interesting thing about soccer also is when we think about being athlete dominated and the impact that athletes have, well, that only lasts for a year. Because then the teams that are top move up, the teams that are in the bottom get relegated down. The whole point, one of the whole points of club soccer is that you put like athletes together and you compete against like athletes on other teams to be able to make that happen. So you find that balance in what you're doing, and we find that where we're not just exploiting the best athletes, but it almost forces you to play team soccer even from an earlier age. Next slide, please. So, this is something that, I really didn't think about until very recently, and Kai brought this up to me. The way you know if you're in the right division is, do you have games that are within a point? If most of your games are 1-0, 2-1, 3-2 games, then you're in the right level of competition. If your games are 5-0 either way, 4-1 either way, and that's the bulk of your games, then you're probably in the wrong grouping. Because you're either beating people up and you're not getting any better if that's what you're doing, or you're getting your head kicked in and you're not getting any better if that's what you're doing, right? So what we want to do is we want to try to place people where they are these close games, 2-1 games, 1-0, win or lose. Close games, because that is what forces you to play team soccer, which is what creates the greatest level of development as people move on. So as you start to evaluate, are we in the right spot, what's happening? That's one of the indicators, not just wins and losses, but how close are the games. If the games are close, then you're in the right spot. It's when they're far apart that becomes problematic. Next slide, please. So, you may have an athletic advantage in one season, but that's going to go away once you get moved up. Or if you have an athletic disadvantage, that'll go away the next year once you get moved down to the appropriate level to find this. Next slide. So, next slide. Okay, and one more. So, the other problem with focusing on winning is that, you see this all the time. A really good example of this is swim. If you have any kids that are on swim teams or in swim clubs, one of the things that you'll find is when they're really good at 7, 8, 9 years old, then what'll happen is the coach will say, man, your child is so good. We should probably start moving to 4 practices, 5 practices a week. So they're at 4 or 5 practices a week. Then they say they need to come, Saturday's optional, but we really think you should go to their Saturday practices. Then you're at 6 practices a week at 9 years old. Then you start doing doubles, where you'll practice in the morning and in the afternoons 3 days a week, plus your other regular practices. So they'll have a very common. So have 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds doing 9 practices a week, okay? And they're phenomenal. But then everybody grows and gets taller than they are. They become more successful. And these are the kids with the $200 bathing suits and things along those lines because they're so awesome when they're 11 years old, right? And then everybody else is good. And they get frustrated, and what do? They stop swimming, right? And that becomes the dilemma that we end up seeing when we place this emphasis on winning. And nothing places an emphasis on winning like winning, right? There is nothing like being good to make you focus on winning is the most important thing. And when we have that emphasis, what happens? That becomes more important than anything else. Those kids become frustrated. As levels become more equal, they're more likely to drop out. They're more likely to cheat in response to things as a way to improve that performance, try to ensure success. And it's much more difficult. Whereas if you place the emphasis on improvement, those are the individuals who end up staying with the sport longer, liking their sport longer, being more dedicated. I'm having this issue with my students right now. I teach a freshman seminar class at Texas. And so if you're a freshman at Texas, you're in the top 10% of your high school class. That means you haven't gotten a B in high school, maybe 1 B in high school, right? These are very successful students. So now they go to college. Are they all going to get A's? No. So I just asked them the other day, who's feeling like a fraud? And they all feel like a fraud. They all feel like their high school was terrible, it didn't prepare them well, they don't know what they're doing, right? Because it's the first time they really struggled academically. And one of the things I let them know is that's just part of being a freshman. And then after your freshman year, it gets better. And it's amazing how that piece of information makes a huge difference. That their performance isn't just about them. Because the other problem you have is, because everybody you talk to has A's. Why is that? Because only people with A's talk to anybody, right? How'd you do? I got an A. Huh? How about that, right? Is anybody like, man, I got a C. How did you do? People don't share that information, right? So you think you're the only one that's struggling. You're the only one that's having that problem. And so helping them to be aware of that is beneficial, and it's the same thing. When your emphasis is on improvement, it allows you to take that perspective a little bit more easily. Then, if the total perspective is on winning, that undermines that, and that makes that problematic. Does that make sense? Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the dilemma. I hate saying this in front of the coaches, but this is part of the deal. Like, I got to decide if my coach is any good. You know what I mean? As a parent, and I'm watching this, and if they're winning, I can reasonably be assured, because it's a team game, and I know my daughter's the greatest soccer player ever, but everybody else has to be okay for us to win, and so I can't just, like, in swimming, it's all just her. But in soccer, it can't just be her, so the coach must be doing something right. I can reasonably be sure that the coaches are good if we're winning. But if you're not winning, how do you know? right? Like, what is it about? How do I understand this? And the other problem is, so I grew up in Philadelphia playing football. Soccer to me was a pretty cool girl sport that, boys occasionally played, right? But I didn't have any, I just thought it was stupid. So I have no idea what to tell my daughter. I have no sense, other than run fast, right? I don't really have any words of wisdom to provide to her. And being a professor in kinesiology and not being able to tell my daughter anything about sport is real. And my other daughter rows, right? I don't have any, what do I say to that? I have nothing on that. So this becomes a huge problem. And as a parent, you feel as though you should be able to help them, right? You should be able to offer some guidance. You ought to have some answers. You ought to know what's going on. And it's exceedingly uncomfortable to not know that. So what is it about? How should we think about this? And how do we try to move it forward? Next slide, please. So, a couple of things that you want to look for to get a sense that this is a developmental approach and that things are going the way they ought to be going. One is flexible positions. If my child, for 2 years, is playing the same position at this age, then that's a problem. Then you need to talk to your coach about moving your child around and giving different perspectives. Because there's nobody who knows what position they should be playing at 7 years old or 8 years old, right? You should be moving around, you should be getting different experiences, you should be playing up front, playing in the back, playing lots of different places so you can figure this out. And I know nobody wants to play defense, right? But that is part of the gig. You play defense for a while, it makes you a better offensive player. You help to understand this to a greater extent, okay? So that is, as opposed to something that should be frustrating to, yes, I know your kid scores 1 billion goals, right? But sometimes they gotta play some defense. And instead of that being a frustration, that should be an indication that your coach is doing the right thing. That should be an indication of success. Next slide. It is amazing how much you're going to appreciate soft, positive touches, right? So I remember my daughter, man, they just knock the ball all over the place, right? And I'm still amazed when we're at a game and somebody gets a hard ball and one of the older girls just boom and just stops it right on her phone. I'm just astounded that they can do that, because I'm still kind of stuck with kids your age and watching them and just, it's amazing that difference. But do they have a positive touch? Do they have a soft touch? That's one of the things that you should see improving over the course of the year, that they're better able to control the ball and do things with it. Next, please. Shape and position, relationship amongst positions is huge. I remember my daughter figured out that defense was like a Nike swoop, right? So one person would go up and then the other two would come around to be in support positions with that. Man, I loved hearing the coach say that because I was like, oh, there it is. That's what they're doing, right? I know what that is now. I've learned a little bit of soccer, right? And so what is your shape? What happens as they get older? This year, so my daughter's playing U15, that is the whole focus. The entire focus is shape. Are you in shape? What's your relationship to other players? What is your role within that? How do you move that forward? How do you see that? Does everybody roll? I used to get so mad at my daughter when I didn't understand the game. And she was little and I was like, why aren't you going after the ball? And it's like, I have to have the discipline to stay in my position. Because the other team's going to reverse field, and if I'm not there, if we're not maintaining shape, then we're going to lose, right? And so she has to have discipline to be able to maintain that and not run after the ball. It's interesting. You see that very often in little kid baseball, right? Where when they first start playing t-ball and somebody hits the ball and all 9 guys run after the ball to try to get the ball and there's no position discipline. Same thing in soccer. How do you maintain shape? Where are you supposed to be on the field? Trying to appreciate that and see that. And an example of this, and this is again is one of those things of how teams play with shape to be able to gain an advantage. So you're playing 9 on 9. So once you move up to that level, well, you probably don't need 4 defenders to play at that level. You're going to score more if you don't have that. But the next year they're going to play 11v11 and they're going to have 4 defenders. So do you want to spend a year playing 3 defenders there, or do you want to get ready for the next year and play 4 defenders? You may not score as much, but you're getting a better sense of what a true shape is and how you're supposed to play the game and how that's going to translate to the next year. And this is one of the things I think we usually don't appreciate about the coaches is that they have a focus on not just this year, but the next year and 2 years after that, and where are they trying to get them to show these performances and see this happening. And so there's decisions that are made that quite frankly do cost you wins. But in the long-term development of the player, it demonstrates that ability and moves that forward. Next slide, please. Movement into space to create angles. You will have an epiphany when your kids are older and you begin to appreciate when they run backwards and move into space instead of always moving forward. and to see the space to move in that, to be open for a pass, to be able to create a spot to move, to pull a defender with them, even though they don't get the ball, but to move into space so a defender widens to be able to open the attack for somebody else. Being able to appreciate those types of things, it's totally changed how I watch the game. Being able to appreciate that movement into space and what happens with that. And then it was like 10, 11 before she really figured that out. Next, willingness to create attack through the field instead of direct. Instead of always attacking down the sidelines into the corner to your fastest person who runs down and crosses it. Instead, what do you want to see? You want to see passing to, this is why you have offensive midfielders, to pass to the midfielder and then the midfielder distributes around, and to be able to move through that. Again, they can't do this. Your 8-year-olds can't do this yet. Your 7-year-olds can't do this yet. But it's trying to learn how to do that that makes them better soccer players as they move forward. They're going to make weak passes. They're going to turn the ball over when they do this. But it's the attempt to play the game at a higher level that is really what's going to move them forward. And one of the things that is a great frustration, I remember asking one of the coaches, what do you love to see that frustrates you, that frustrates the parents, but you actually see it as a positive? And the two things he talked about was trying to make a pass into the middle, even though it gets intercepted. I'm happy to see they're seeing that and trying to make that go. And secondly, when they take on a defender and try to beat them, instead of just passing the ball off. Even if the ball gets taken away. Ball gets taken away, the parents are like, oh, what are you doing? You're going to pass the ball. But he looks at that as a coach and he thinks, I love the fact that you're trying to make it happen, that you have enough confidence to try to take somebody on. And if you keep doing that, then you're going to start to win those balls, right? And so it's a very different way to think about what they're doing and to think about that progress. Next slide, please. Okay. So here's the other thing. All of this is stuff that I've learned over time. And I didn't know any of this when my kid was little. And so it was very frustrating. So to what extent are you trying to learn the game? Are you trying to figure this out as a parent? Because my guess is most of you haven't played the game. And if you haven't played the game, then you don't appreciate these higher points, and you don't know how to look at the game and to try to see where at least they're thinking the right way, even if they don't execute. So why are you trying to do this? Let me give you some suggestions of what to do. Next, please. Pick an EPL team. I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan. Apparently, I'm the only one in Round Rock. Every time I say that, people give me their condolences. So why am I a Hotspur fan? And Coys is, come on, you first. All right. So, 5 years ago, our coach said every family should pick an EPL team. So you start watching games, and then your kids will start watching games with you. They'll learn more about the game, you'll learn more about the game. And the best thing is if every family picks a different team, because then you can talk smack at the games, right? About what was going on and what's happening, and you can yip at each other a little bit as to what your team's doing, what's happening as big games come apart, right? And so I've been amazed at how much I've really learned. One, I've been amazed at how much a fan I've become. But, and my friends back home are like, you are just an idiot. You know what I mean? They don't understand it at all. But, how much you learn about the game and how much I enjoy talking to people about it, right? And giving them a hard time because of, because Man United is looking like crap right now and that just makes my day. You know what I mean? So having those types of conversations with other parents builds that interest in what's going on and also builds interest in the players. And if you don't know how to pick an EPL team, I didn't know how to pick an EPL team. Bill Simmons has an article for Americans, how to pick an EPL team. So if you just Google how to pick an EPL team, then he has a whole list of guidelines of what to do to pick an EPL team, right? So one of them is the jersey, the kit, something that you would actually wear as an adult. So that eliminates all the teams with the yellow and black stripes, right? That's out. I'm not going to wear that. Is it in a place you want to vacation? Okay, London, I'd go there. So now it's one of the London teams. So it is a way to figure it out. And the way I actually picked Tottenham was Clint Dempsey was going to sign with one of the English teams. And he played for the Texans. And so I was like, all right, wherever he goes, that's my team. I'm all in. And he picked Tottenham. And so I've been all in on Tottenham. I even bought a t-shirt, right? I have a Tottenham t-shirt. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so pick an EPL team. You'd be amazed at how much it teaches you and your children about it. Next, watch the national team games and make it a family event. We watch especially my daughter, I have a daughter, every women's game we watch. We went down to San Antonio to watch the women play. We watch every women's game. We know all the women that are on the team. We've watched all their videos about where they went to college and all that stuff. And it is just a family event. I'm a huge Eagles fan, more than the Longhorns, women's national team's on, we're watching. The whole family gets together when we watch together, right? And again, that is one of those things where you learn a lot of soccer. Do the same thing with the men. My daughter's not as big a fan of the men's. My wife doesn't watch that as much, but I always watch the men. And so it is amazing how it just helps to change how you and the kids understand. And I love having my daughter tell me what they're doing wrong. Like, we're at that point where I'm like, so what do you think? God, I can't believe he did, right? You know, it's really interesting that this demonstration of knowledge that she has, which helps me to understand it. Next, ask your coach what they're trying to achieve. What are you trying to do? Your coach has a plan. They may not be executing that plan, but your coach has a plan, and you will see that plan in games, and if you go to practices, you're going to see them working on aspects of that plan. They're not going to work on everything. You can't fix it. How many people have been to SeaWorld? Everybody been to SeaWorld, right? They get Shamu to jump over the thing. How do you think they get Shamu to do that? So they go up to Shamu and they're like, hey Shamu, here's what we're going to do. It's this great trick, right? I'm going to hold a line up out of the water, and you just jump right over it, and I'm going to give you some fish, and then we're good. All right? You want to try that? No. What do? They put the rope on the bottom of the pool. When Shamu swims over the rope, they give him fish. Then they move the rope up a little bit. Shamu swims over the rope, they give him fish. Swims under the rope, they don't. Swims over the rope, give him fish. Move it up a little bit. Move it up a little bit, move it up a little bit, take it out of the water. Swims under it, no fish. Jumps over it, fish. Until they get it out of the water and he's jumping out of the water. Shamu doesn't need to know where they're going, right? You don't have to tell them that's the plan. You just slowly move them in that direction. Your coach is slowly moving your children in a direction to become better soccer players. And they have a plan for this year and how things progress after this year. And if you don't see it, ask them. Your coach ought to be able to explain it to you and what's going on. Next, please. Ask your kid what their job is, right? Like, what are you supposed to tell them? Oh, my daughter played like crap on Sunday, right? Worst game of the season. Like, what is going on? What are you doing? And she just, you know what I mean? Like, would you do well? Would you do poorly? What's happening with this? And part of this was, she's like, I don't even know like, she was lost. She didn't appreciate what she was supposed to be doing, what was happening. She's trying to do too much, and she sort of lost her responsibilities. So she just met without it. So I sent a note to the coach. I said, Emma's kind of lost right now. She's not sure what she's supposed to be doing. I think she's making it too complicated. If you could explain it to her, that would be great. Because I have no idea what she's supposed to do. But then, she went and talked to him, she came back, she's like, okay, I take the offensive forward or the offensive midfielder, that's my responsibility, mark her the whole game. When I win the ball, I go wide and then try to connect to one of the offensive midfielders or the forwards. Boom, that's her responsibility. Now, I can watch the game and see what she's supposed to do. Is she attacking that offensive midfielder? How is she playing? Is she winning the ball from her? And how is she passing coming off of that as she's moving forward? I can start to appreciate that because I know what she's supposed to be doing, or at least what she thinks she's supposed to be doing. And if we have the conversation like I just had, and she doesn't know what she's supposed to be doing, then that gives me an opportunity to talk to coach and say, my kid's confused and doesn't like to talk to you. So you think maybe you could ask her a little bit about this, right? And so then that clears it up and moves it forward. But it's amazing how much that helps you to understand what they're trying to make happen. And if you do these things, then you know the game enough to see what they're trying to do. And I think that is half the battle, is to understand the idea that they're trying to execute. Even if they don't execute it, you can see the thought behind it and what they're trying to make happen. And as you see those things improve, then you feel better about the direction that they're going and what's happening with it. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's my experience? Next slide. So that's my daughter, Emma. She looks gigantic in that picture. She's not that tall. She's fairly tall, but she's not that tall. Okay, hit me. So what do we get? Reason. So why am I in this club to start? Why did I start this club? Why do you think I joined this club when she was 7? It was convenient. It was close by. Somebody else was going here, so we had a carpool. Good, right? Halfway through that season, they lost a game, and the coach came up to her and told her it was the best game she's played so far. That was a transformative experience for her. because it was the first time where she realized that her performance can be independent of the outcome. And that maybe she was pretty good at this, right? Totally changed how she thought about the game, totally changed her confidence and how she played much more aggressive after that. I mean, it was really an impressive thing to see. And so that was fabulous to have that experience. And so this performance feedback outside of winning, I think is really important. That's why I'm still here, right? Because we have options. And so, so that's part of it. Next, multiple positions. Oh my gosh, she has played everywhere. She has played. Last year, in the same season, she played outside defensive player, center mid, attacking midfielder, holding midfielder, attacking forward, and up front as the striker. She played all those positions during the season. She is now, this year is the first year probably last spring, she started to settle into a holding midfielder, and now that's her position. That's been her position this year. She's 14. That kind of position discipline starts to become important. That's when that starts to happen. So this is the first time she's played a position and sort of focused on a position. The whole time that she's been here, she's played so many different positions. She's moved all over the place from offense to defense, from right to left, mid, outside, everywhere. And as a result of that, she has a better understanding of the game. Next. Almost no practice time spent on set plays. I mean, I almost think, maybe a little bit of time we could spend on executing some of these things, but the focus is on passing, receiving, movement, shape, what your responsibilities are, how you move things, and that is all the way through. Next, please. Focus on touch, passing, reversing field control, team attack, shape. Next. And a similarity of focus and drills throughout, right? That's one of the things. You come here and every team's warming up the same way. Every team looks the same. Every team is doing similar drills. And that just makes it easier when they move from this year to next year and they get a different coach. And the next year and they get a different coach. There is a core philosophy, the way they do things, the way they go about their business, which I think is a nice thing. Next. My daughter's teams got their heads kicked in when they were little, right? Heads kicked in. We struggled. We lost a lot. Now, we're undefeated, right? So we've tied. So we're 4-0-1 right now so we're in State Champions League and we're 4-0-1 right now. We have one more win that we'll clinch our first place in our group. And so that is the common experience of a lot of Texans teams. They struggle early, they have difficulty early, but the time they're 14 and 15, all those skills that they've been teaching them catch up to them and they're able to execute those skills and be able to move forward, and they play the type of soccer younger that they can do later. I was fortunate enough to be in Egypt, and I was talking to some folks with the Swim Federation, the National Swim Federation, and they're really concerned because they do very well internationally with 13-year-olds, but by 18, none of them are performing well. And we had a conversation about it. It was quite clear to me that they were training their 13-year-olds to be dominant 13-year-olds instead of to be great 18-year-olds. And you would train them differently. They were all burned out. They were all injured. They peaked early. They didn't have anything left to do by the time they were 18 and they fell behind. And so I think as you look at this, the way the club operates is they train 7-year-olds to be good 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds. And they're trying to teach that game early so that they can develop those skills and move those forward. Is it frustrating? Yes, it is frustrating. If you're not looking at the right, and even if you are looking at the right thing, nobody likes to lose, it's still frustrating, But that's part of the gig, and that's part of, figuring this out and moving on. I remember a couple of years ago, we were in a tournament, and it was an elimination game, and it went to penalties. It went like 8 penalties, and we lost. And my daughter was just devastated. But I told her, I was like, you don't want to hear this right now, but that was a beautiful thing. To be in that kind of competition and to be in that moment where they were so excited when they made goals and so devastated when they missed goals. I mean, to be in that level of competition and to be that tied into what you're doing is really a beautiful thing. And win or lose, it's a beautiful thing. They lost, it's still a beautiful thing for them to be exposed to and them to be a part of, right? And And so that's just part of the game with what's going on. And yes, it can be frustrating, but if you're focusing on the right things and you're looking at the right stuff, you should see that progress. And if you don't, then you have a legitimate reason to talk to your coach and say, what's going on, because I don't see these, you said this is what we were going to be doing. I'm not seeing that. Help me to understand what I'm seeing, right? And then your coach ought to be able to explain that to you and ought to be able to help you to understand. Okay? And that's it. So, thank you for your attention. And any questions you might have? Thank you. All right, so I'm here. If you want to come up and chat individually with me, I'm happy to do that. Or if you got a question, shout it out. If not, thank you so much